Thanks a lot, Anneli, and thank you for inviting me to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I had to put a heading on this intervention for myself when starting to draft it, and that became ERA, a framework for discussion or a framework for action, ? This relates, of course, to the history of ERA, where actual move from getting from discussion to action isn't but more than a few years old, 2007 to be exact. The focus of my intervention will be on the interface between member state policies and the European policies, European Commission, on challenges to be overcome or realities to handle. And to start this, I will do against the background of joint programming initiatives and infrastructures being extremely important part of the idea of ERA. I will start by quoting the ERAC opinion on the ERA framework, quite recent. ERAC is, just to refresh your memory, the only body where member state representatives and Commission sit together to discuss strategic issues. Now, ERAC states that publicly funded research is largely funded at national level out of budgets ultimately responsive to the play of democratic debate within our countries. And certainly you ask ourselves, what's new in this? Well, it's very, very old and self-evident thing. However, in the context we now are debating, it is extremely important because, as a consequence, national priorities and European priorities compete. From a member state perspective, the framework program is, as a matter of fact, already a member state contribution to the European cause. To go further in coordination of European cooperation must be extremely well argued. This is said also against the background that myself, I'm a very convinced European, but I'm also at the same time quite clear about the obstacles we face when we try to advance further into the arena of coordination. The argumentation is a responsibility for both member states and Commission representatives. General references to global competition is, by experience, not enough. A strong evidence base with specifics is needed. Let me just give you the example of societal challenges, which should be understood as something of extreme urgency and also of obvious common interests. However, implementation of most joint programming initiatives with the objective of addressing societal challenges is still at an early stage. And it's quite reasonable to ask the question, why? Infrastructure. At the same time, there is quite an agreement that European scientific infrastructure is of paramount importance to achieving excellence in European research, and also that infrastructure of the kind represented by S3 roadmap, which is an excellent piece of work, cannot be achieved on a single European country basis, but must be addressed in common. However, we know that only about a quarter of the identified objects on the roadmap is in a stage of implementation. And this makes me ask the question, do we really share same idea about rationale for joint European efforts? The ERAC opinion, if I turn to that now, covers quite a lot of ground, but I will give you just a very few strategically important pieces. The first is the need for a voluntary approach in implementing ERA. I won't go very much into that for the simple reason that we heard the Commissioner stating her views and her ambition already. But there is in ERAC, and that is, I think, quite important because of the ERAC composition of the Member States and Commission. There is a complete agreement that there should be a focus on the 5 axes previously identified: human resources, cross-border cooperation, knowledge circulation, research infrastructure, and also the international dimension. Furthermore, what we say, and I hear now also quite an interesting compatibility with what both the Commission and the Presidency has noted, we need an agreed vision of European research area which is achievable against identified goals and realistic timeframes, making monitoring and evaluation processes for the ERA, including Horizon 2020, mandatory. We need also to go further in order to achieve ERA. We need to go further into developing the joint programming concept. For example, by widening the concept, despite the problems that we have met with to implement up till now, but we need to widen the concept also to cover in relevant aspects education in connection with the joint programming initiatives. However, looking back now to the question of interface between Member State and Commission, we can see a challenge here that needs to be handled, and to be handled quite soon. And that is the fact that joint programming is supposed to be a Member State-led process, but to implement the joint programming, it's very likely, I would say it's obvious, that we need to connect the process also to the framework program, to the Horizon. And then the question arises, what about the Member State lead? Is this a genuine dilemma, or is it something that can be solved in a nice and smooth way? We do not know the answer to this. We need to have a revitalization of the process on infrastructures. That is quite obvious. We need to give better teeth to those who work with infrastructures on the European level. We need also to approach a part of ERA which has not been addressed yet, in my mind, and that is your cross-border cooperation between research performing organizations, aka not only institutes, but very much universities, with the growing importance as research centers. This is a touchy issue because it concerns competence, it concerns both areas of education and research, but it's absolutely necessary to advance on the issue of cross-border cooperation, and that must be done, and I'm grateful for the signal from the Commissioner on this point, also in cooperation with stakeholders. This agenda, and it is only part of the agenda that is necessary to make a reality of ERA, will certainly take very, very strong political commitment. And I can see a certain problem? Yes, I think it's a problem. If the focus in discussions to follow is too much on technicalities, there are certainly technicalities that has to be solved in order to advance cooperation, but they will be solved once a political commitment is really, and not only rhetorically, in place. And I end with my basic question. Do we really share the same idea about rationale for joint European efforts? Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bjarne, for your clear opinions and statements. And we go directly to the next speaker, who is Mr. Volker Rieke. And from your position as the Director General in the German Federal Ministry and as the member of the ERAC as well, you are able to oversee the European research area dimensions from many different perspectives. And as the former chair of the Strategic Forum for International Cooperation, the SFIC, you have also a practical experience, hand-on experience on how to run one of our ERA groups. So please, the floor is yours, Volker.